As we start to turn our attention to the 2025 NFL Draft in the next few weeks, everybody's talking about the quarterback position. Obviously, players like Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe, and Jackson Dart are taking a lot of the conversation, but I'm also fascinated by the guys who could go in the mid to late rounds. There are lots of unique prospects like Kyle McCord, Curtis Rourke, and Seth Hennigan, but today I want to focus on a quarterback who might have played his way into being drafted. Sure, he's not a franchise guy, and he probably won't lead a team to a Super Bowl, but the difference between hearing your name called and not hearing your name called is ginormous, both for your opportunities of making the roster and just in general for finishing the story. Today, I want to talk about Brady Cook. He's a guy who had an impressive combine performance, will go down as one of the best quarterbacks in Mizzou football history, and with his physical measurables, might have a chance of making an NFL roster and maybe making an impact someday. In today's video, we're going to do a draft profile feature on him, talk about how the guy who grew up loving Mizzou ended up becoming a star for them, and his prospects of making it to the league. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about Brady Cook. Okay, so far I have done a few NFL draft features, and you guys should go check them out down in the comment section below. I've done guys like Bryson Daly, Jalen Milroe, Cam Ward, Seth Hennigan, Tedero McMillan, and for Mizzou fans, Luther Burden III. But in order to understand how Cook got to this point, we actually need to go back to Mizzou basketball. The Brady Cook Mizzou story starts back in 2012, as Mizzou was a 2 seed and matched up with Norfolk State in the first round of March Madness. They ended up losing in one of the biggest upsets in tournament history, and this hit Brady hard. His dad said, quote, "He went up to his room pouting, and I remember going up and having a talk with him saying, quote, 'Hey son, listen here man, you're gonna get your butt down there right now.' And Brady just kept saying he could not believe that they lost." Brady's football journey started in 2nd grade from a young age, and he worked at one of the area's best-known quarterback trainers. His mom said, quote, "He never wavered from wanting to be a quarterback from 2nd grade on." By middle school, he had played well enough that he could become a factor when it came to picking a high school, as his sisters had all attended St. Dominic and O'Fallon, and the family considered Christian Brothers College, but Brett Gabbert was already entrenched at the quarterback spot there. Brady would end up going to Chaminade, where he would learn behind future quarterback Michael McGovern. As a sophomore at Chaminade, Cook took over, passing for 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns, while also rushing for 300 yards and 2 scores. His recruiting profile slowly began to grow, and he was hoping to be a Power 5 quarterback. He decided to visit Iowa State and Indiana, and was also talking with coaches from Iowa and Wisconsin, but his dad suspected his heart's son was set on home. He was offered by Mizzou, and that's where he was going to go. His dad said, quote, "I told him, you can pad your offers where you can be that guy that has 10 to 15, but really Brady, what do you want to do? Why are we playing games? Let's call Barry." Barry as in the head coach, Barry Odom. The Missouri Tigers became Cook's first Power 5 offer, and it was a dream for Cook, who grew up a diehard Mizzou fan. He said, quote, "I've always wanted to play at Mizzou. I've been fortunate enough to build a great relationship with Coach Odom and Coach Dooley, and I knew as soon as I got the offer in July that it was the place for me." As he said, he wasn't going to wait for other offers to come in, which would stunt his recruitment profile, but he committed early and other schools would back off. This either meant that he was a hidden gem or that he was overinflated. The truth is, he ended up being a hidden gem. Cook became Mizzou's first class of 2020 commitment in September of 2018, and then he had 2 prolific years at Chaminade. He threw for nearly 5,000 yards and 47 touchdowns. He never earned that 4th star, but he was honestly not too worried about it. His dad said, quote, "Could have he gotten more offers? Maybe. But once you get the opportunity, it doesn't really mean much, right?" Scouts honestly were split on Cook, but he was confident in his ability and how he would transition. He said, quote, "As a quarterback, I have a strong, accurate arm, and I have the ability to run and scramble when needed. And I believe I have great instincts for last-minute reads and scrambling plays." But in November of 2019, things would end up changing, as Mizzou would fire Barry Odom, and Cook was preparing to enroll there. Days after Elijah Drinkwitz was hired, he visited Cook's home and put to rest any fears Cook had. He stuck with his pledge. According to 24/7 Sports, Brady was a 3-star recruit, the number 29 pro-style quarterback, and the 745th best player in the class of 2020. So, how would Brady Cook do at Mizzou? Admittedly, I never thought Brady Cook would be the star he became for the Tigers. As a Mizzou fan, I was way more invested in Connor Bazelak. In 2020, Brady Cook would end up playing very little, as he ended up having 1 touchdown against Vanderbilt in garbage duty. Going into 2021, Bazelak was the quarterback at the time, and they also brought in hotshot Tyler Macon from East St. Louis. As the season progressed, Bazelak would end up getting hurt, and Tyler Macon would start against Georgia. But Cook would also split time in that game, and he'd go 14 of 19 for 78 yards. His first good action would come against Army, as Bazelak had entered the portal, and in total, in that first start, he had 238 yards with 1 touchdown through the air and 1 touchdown on the ground. Sadly, they lost 24-22, and this was extremely embarrassing. Going into the 2022 season, Bazelak was now in Indiana, and Tyler Macon had gone to the portal, so he was expected to be the guy for them. Cook in his first year starting got a lot of heat, as he just wasn't really able to put it all together all that much, especially in the first half of the season. He did have 2 touchdowns against Louisiana Tech, but had a disastrous game against K-State, and Mizzou got blown out 40-12. Things would not get much better, as they had that epic humiliating loss on the road against Auburn, blew it against number 1 Georgia when they had a chance to upset them at home, and then Cook had 2 interceptions in a loss to Florida. Mizzou was 2-4 in the first half of the season, and Brady got a lot of flack, as I said. But towards the end of the season, he would slowly start to get better. He ended up leading them to a win over South Carolina, had 2 touchdowns in a close loss to Kentucky, and then ended up having nearly 400 all-purpose yards against number 5 Tennessee. He had 251 yards and 3 touchdowns in a win over New Mexico State, and then had 2 touchdowns in a win over Arkansas. Because of that, Mizzou ended up making a bowl game, but for the second straight year, they would lose. They would lose 27-17 against Sam Hartman and Wake Forest, and in total, Brady had 2,700 yards with 14 touchdowns and 585 yards and 6 scores on the ground. At this point, nobody in the Mizzou fan base really wanted him to start in 2023, but the cupboard was bare. They'd have to go with Brady once again, and to start out the year, it didn't look all that great. Sure, he did end up having 5 touchdowns in their first 2 games against Middle Tennessee and South Dakota, but they almost lost to the Blue Raiders, and no one really cared about those games. Then, Brady Cook came to life and changed the entire perception around him. Against number 15 Kansas State, Cook would end up having 3 touchdowns and nearly 400 yards, as they would beat the number 15 Wildcats, an old Big 12 rival, by way of a crazy 60-yard field goal from Harrison Mevis. He then would continue his hot streak, throwing for nearly 350 yards and 2 touchdowns in a win over Memphis, and then 400 yards and 4 touchdowns in a win over Vanderbilt. All of a sudden, Mizzou was 5-0, ranked, and Cook had saved his career. Sadly, he had a late interception, and they would lose to number 23 LSU, but he would bounce back. He had 2 touchdowns in a win over number 24 Kentucky, led them to a 34-12 victory over South Carolina while not throwing an incompletion, and then helped them put up 36 points in a win over number 13 Tennessee. Mizzou was now cruising, but they weren't going to go to the college football playoff. Brady Cook had a late interception against number 2 Georgia to like a 350-pound lineman, and they ended up losing that game. He'd then have a crazy 4th and 25 completion to beat Florida, would put up 48 points and win over Arkansas, and Mizzou had gone 10-2. Cook had a tremendous season, and when it mattered most, he ended up having a big touchdown in their win over number 7 Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. The Tigers had gone 11-2, and Cook threw for 3,300 yards with 21 touchdowns and also 300 yards and 8 scores on the ground. He had saved his career, and all the Mizzou fans could kick rocks now. He had proved everybody wrong. Going into 2024, he was considered one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC, but the season would be off for him. Some people are saying that he went to a bad quarterback coach in the offseason, and others believe that he ended up having an injury. The truth is somewhere probably in the middle, but Cook did not have the same season in 2024. He had 2 touchdowns in a win over Murray State, and did not have a passing touchdown in a win over Buffalo. He didn't look all that much better in Week 3, as they had to come from behind and beat number 24 Boston College by way of 2 scores from him, and then he had 2 scores in a win where they barely etched it out against Vanderbilt. Mizzou was 4-0 with college football playoff aspirations, but they'd soon come falling back to earth. Against number 25 Texas A&M, he'd have his worst game of the season, throwing for 186 yards and a touchdown, but they got blown out 41-10. Luckily, he'd bounce back with a win over UMass, but then he'd get hurt. Brady Cook ended up getting pretty badly hurt against Auburn, and he famously went to the hospital and came back and led them to a 21-17 victory over the Auburn Tigers. This was great, but this was short-lived, as he'd play a little bit in their 34-0 loss against Alabama, and then would throw a game-winning touchdown against South Carolina, but it ended up not being game-winning as Carolina went down and scored with just a few seconds remaining, and Mizzou is now out of playoff contention. This didn't stop Brady from finishing the year strong, though, as he led them to wins against Mississippi State and Arkansas, but he did not have a passing touchdown against the Razorbacks, the Crimson Tide, or the Auburn Tigers. He was still becoming a leader and a good quarterback, but his stats were falling off. He'd play in his final game of his Mizzou career against Iowa, and in that game, he'd throw for 287 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they would win by 3. In total, Cook finished his senior season with 2,500 yards, 11 touchdowns and 2 picks, and 5 more scores on the ground. Those were pedestrian numbers compared to 2023, and many would think that his draft stock would fall off because of it. Not quite. Brady Cook ended up becoming one of the better quarterbacks in Mizzou history, despite all the backlash he got. I don't think I've seen a Mizzou quarterback who had a shorter leash than Brady Cook, but he always found a way to prove it and ended up having 2 straight 10-win seasons in the modern era of college football. That does not happen all the time, and he deserves a lot more credit than he gets. He had some extremely memorable moments for Mizzou, and despite falling off in 2024, I think due to injury and scheme, he ended up getting invited to the Combine, where he put up really good numbers, looked sharp, and all of a sudden is playing his way into that Day 3 selection. According to NFL Mock Database, he's currently ranked as the 203rd overall player and is a 7th round projected pick. He ran a 4.59 40 time, had a 37-inch vertical, and just in general looked really sharp. Honestly, my best guess right now is that he will be a 6th or a 7th round pick. According to ESPN, that's what most people believe, as their mock draft has him going in the 7th round with pick number 230 by the Carolina Panthers. Ultimately, he's a guy who could continue to blow up a little bit, as in the modern NFL, sometimes teams are going after experience more than physical traits nowadays it seems. Brady ended up starting for 3 years, has a strong arm, has the height, has the grit, and has the leadership. To me, he screams NFL backup, but that is quite the accomplishment to be honest. For a guy who's only a 3-star recruit, had an extremely short leash at Mizzou, he's honestly proved everybody wrong and has one of the better stories in the 2025 draft class. As a Mizzou fan myself, I definitely doubted him at times, and I even made a video a couple of years ago, and I actually talked to him on Instagram about it, and he's a really good dude, and I hope the best for him moving forwards. But what do you guys think? If you're a big fan of Mizzou or Brady Cook, what do you think of him? How do you think he'll do in the NFL? And what other quarterback prospects should I take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.